Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining in Dr. Judy WTF. And this is a call-in show, as many of you know. So please feel free to call in. Please feel free to use any name you want to stay anonymous if that's what you want to do. And the name of the show is called Dr. Judy WTF. What the Freud? Because like Freud and the repetition principle, we talk about how things are repeated, patterns are repeated, and psychopathologies with the emphasis on psycho are repeated, and we've got to stop this crazy loop that we go through. And I'm going to mind map everything tonight so you'll understand this loop that we go through and the phenomenon of what the Freud. And tonight's topic is a group approach to recovery and healing the wounds of narcissism. And I thought it would be a great idea to approach it from a group point of view for many reasons. First of all, when you're in a group, you get to see things that you don't get to see in individual therapy. Number two, it's sometimes easier for people who've been injured, whether they're victims of narcissistic abuse or they have also taken on traits of narcissism, to maybe identify patterns and qualities in themselves through other people. So it's sort of interesting to look at ourselves in the mirror of other people's patterns and see and mind map other people's wounds of childhood so that we can maybe relate or not relate, and then have insight, because it's always easier from an objective chair to have insight into another person, because when you're in your personhood, it's hard to do it because you're reactive and you're defensive and you're confused and your lens of perception is cracked, and all kinds of things go on that prevent us individually from having this insight. Now, of course, it helps if you have a therapist, psychologist, shining the truth light on your inner world. And then with an expanded version of that in group therapy, you get to see a lot of dynamics play out. Also, one of the aspects of healing in a psychoanalytic model of looking at things is the idea of transference, projection, and things where we transfer our feelings onto other people. For example, I'll give you some solid examples here where in my work, sometimes people will get triggered by me because they have old triggers of the past that remind them of issues they had with their mother, their father, their brother, their sister, and so on. And so they may transfer those feelings onto me. With long-term psychoanalysis, of course, the goal is to work through this transference, which could take an awful lot of time and an awful lot of money. And that's why the mind map, to shorten this journey to healing and make sure that you don't spend 8-10 years on the couch. I don't know if people actually have time and patience for that anymore. I certainly don't, and most of my patients don't. And so we focus in directly instead of dealing with the transference and the projections onto the therapist. We can do it in a group basis where we can watch the transference and the projections on other people and quickly pick it up, mind map it, process it, and then move through the healing process and get to the other side. Another reason I'm bringing up this subject tonight is because I am going to be conducting a seminar, a webinar. March 30th is when it starts. If you could put that up there so people can see. Healing from Narcissistic Abuse webinar workshop. It is starting on March the 30th and goes through April 6th and 13th, 4 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And it includes access to the webinar workshop, of course, the 9-panel mind map video series, the journal for healing from narcissistic abuse, And the PDF of my book, Be the Cause, which if you haven't already, please pick up a copy of that, ask for it. And that's the mind map video series that this particular webinar includes, so that you could see the breakdowns and get a really, really good psychoeducation. So let's get into what is narcissism and what kind of healing actually has to take place, and why group and why we need the insight of many people to paradigm shift out of all this mess. So first of all, my definition of narcissism is a system gone wrong, where parents put their feelings and needs and agendas before their own children. This may look like selfishness, control, which is also a form of selfishness. It can look like a detached emotional, lack of emotional bonding with the child. It can look like making the child fit agendas that the parents want, play the kinds of sports that the parents want, and marry the person that the parents want them to marry. And there's just a lot of aspects where this whole system gets flipped around, and it becomes more about the parents' needs than it does about the child's needs. And as a result of this, I'm going to kind of give you extreme examples so you could get the gist of it. On one end, it can lead to codependency and people-pleasing kinds of behaviors, where the child wants to please the narcissistic parents and be the good girl or the good boy and comply with the system in hopes that the system is going to change and they're going to get some sort of reward out of it. And usually, I would say mostly, this does not flip around and straighten out. Now, it can also go the other way, where a narcissistic parental system can create people who are lacking empathy, who also learn by modeling how to control other people. They learn by modeling how to use and abuse other people emotionally through gaslighting and other passive aggressive and other manipulative tactics. So this is how the system gone wrong lands up in the next generation. And then oftentimes what happens is that especially with couples, the wife or the husband might call me and say, fix my husband, fix my wife. And they drag the person into therapy. And if the therapist is not skilled enough, it's really not a good idea to treat somebody who doesn't want to be in therapy. So the first thing that you have to look at when healing from narcissistic abuse is that there is a lack of empathy from parent to child, and there is a disconnect. That's why I call my healing system Healing Human Disconnect. And this disconnect shows up in all kinds of forms, as I mentioned: control, manipulation, gaslighting, lack of empathy, emotional abuse, name calling, emotional abuse in the form of emotional neglect, sexual abuse, and this power and control thing that people seem to hold over their children's heads. So there's no way that this cannot affect the psyche. So on one end of the spectrum, people may identify with the aggressor, meaning the narcissistic parent, and become like them. On the other end of the spectrum, they may, as I mentioned, become people pleasers and try to fawn and fulfill their supply, their narcissistic supply, so that they gain favor. And none of those dynamics or outcomes of those dynamics produce a healthy psyche. So with this webinar, people will have the opportunity to hear each other's stories as I take them through the journey to healing, because there will be plenty of time for Q&A. And it's filling up. I invite you to please jump in on it. I'm really excited about it. This is the first time that I'm doing this webinar, and no matter where you live, you can join in because it's a webinar. Just remember the time change. Some people are on the East Coast Central Time, and I'm here in California on the West Coast. And then you can supplement your healing journey by choosing to pick a therapist on the team and work with that particular therapist. And I think it's going to be a very, very interesting journey. So let's dive into this group approach. So as you, many of you know, individual approach, that sort of is the norm because people go to therapy, they go to therapy and they speak one-on-one with their therapist. And so there are basically four eyes on the situation. There's the patient's point of view, and then there's the therapist's point of view. And sometimes with these injuries, it's very, very hard to get on the same page. So one of the experiments that I remember from my study in psychology is the rhesus monkey experiment where, no, it was the Harlow experiment with the rhesus monkeys. And these monkeys were detached from their caregivers, and they were either fed through a wire and a bottle or through a cloth and a bottle, or yeah, that's what it was. The point of the experiment is that the monkeys chose the cozy bottle, the one that was coziest. And so there was this very, very strong desire to attach. There was a strong desire to have that contact over the quality of what was in the bottle was the desire to have contact with that furry object that it was wrapped in. And so with that as a metaphor, it's easier when people are surrounded by other people who've gone through the same experience, because like monkeys and like pack animals, we tend to empathize and identify with like-minded people, or in this case, like wounded people. And it's very, very hard because of the defenses that we erect to see our own. However, when we're seeing a like-minded or a like type of wound, it's easier to identify with it. And that's why this particular YouTube channel is useful, because not only are you able to understand yourselves, hopefully learn something from this YouTube channel, but also hear other people's stories and just think to yourself, oh, that sounds very familiar. That sounds familial. And as they go through their layers of sharing and insights and feedback and so on, then woken up within you is the ability to see something maybe that you never saw before. So this is a call-in show, everybody, and I invite you to call in and ask questions, and let's have many eyes on this healing process so that we can get more insight. And in the meantime, I'm going to do a little bit of mind mapping so that we can understand narcissism even deeper and review things, because repetition is the mother of learning. And I know that many of you watched the show so many times, and interestingly enough, you can't really hear this information enough, because the psyche is very interesting in how well it is able to deflect and close down and defend and deny and do all kinds of things to avoid the truth. Because in truth, sometimes there's a lot of pain, and nobody wants to open up painful aspects of themselves. However, if we don't go to the cause, the pain point, the abuses and neglects, if we neglect going there, we often just end up with symptoms that we end up managing and medicating, and then that doesn't really do a lot of good because it doesn't paradigm shift anything. And I think many of you have noticed that you're notice this yourselves. I have a lot of people calling to say, hey, I want anger management, and I don't manage anger. We go to the root cause of the anger, and then once we're able to tap into the hurt and the feelings behind it, then we can process those feelings, and then the symptoms start clearing up. So imagine a group of people who are either on one end of the spectrum, they're injured and from narcissistic abusive behavior from parents, and then repeating again in relationships, whether it be a spouse, a lover, replicating it with a boss, a friend. You know, this thing just keeps cycling through until it is dismantled. So imagine a group of people who have eyes on each other's situation and insight into each other's situation. And that's why I'm really excited about doing this on a group basis. And if anybody wants to call in, remember we are on a group basis because there are other viewers watching, and there are other viewers having thoughts and insights, and being reminded of their own wounds, and possibly being sparked by an idea that you might share and that they can identify with and then see more clearly. So if there's anybody who wants to call in, I always love that, because I love talking to an individual as opposed to a camera. It's always more fun that way. So please feel free to do that. And in the meantime, I am going to ask you to please put the mind map up so we can go through this mind map from the point of view of the narcissistic injuries, and then how group therapy can help this, and how important it is to have like-minded people or like-injured people being able to give insight into other like-injured injuries, if that makes sense. So let's go through the panels yet once again. We've got panels 1, 2, and 3 that represent the past. So this past is the encodings that get absorbed by you. So the first panel is labeled the wound, and the wound is all the abuses and neglects that we experience in our first few years of life and even beyond. So if you notice the light in the background, that light represents our potential to be the best of our best. It represents the unshadowed parts of us that manifest without compromising our mental health. The shadows or dots all over the white light represent the limitations, compromises, and injuries in the form of neglect and abuse. And so you can see that when we are shadowed over by verbal abuse, sexual abuse, physical abuse, emotional neglect, parents that lack empathy, parents that try to control, manipulate, and have you live their agenda, we crack up. We literally start to crack our lens of perception. And why do we crack our lens of perception is because we self-define through the eyes of our parents. And so if our parents are giving us horrible feedback, if our parents are disconnected from us, if they're not giving us basic attunement and mirroring and skin contact and breastfeeding and a family system of safety, that's a problem. And that problem will cause reactions. And those reactions are the reactions that are felt in the amygdala or the emotional brain, the limbic system. And these reactions can vary from time to time, and also depending on the kinds of injuries and the sensitivities of the baby and the child and the adolescent and so on. So some people typically react by shutting down, Other people react by getting angry. Some people are uh, fleers, some people are fighters, some people fawn, some people freeze. And so the amygdala doesn't have a cognitive component because it is the primitive brain. So when you're looking at people on a group level, you get to see their amygdala in action. You get to hear their stories of their wounds of childhood, and then you get to study them and see what happened, who done it, how they reacted, and maybe learn something about yourself that you didn't know before. And why don't we know it? Because again, when it's outside of us, it's easy to see. So that's why it's easy for me to see what's going on with my patients from this chair. If I were in their skin, if I were in their injury, I'd be in my amygdala and it wouldn't be so clear sighted. So I think group is a beautiful way to take yourself out of yourself for a few minutes and see other people and their journey and identify your own blind spots, because when they have a similar experience to you and you've been in denial about it, and then you're able to watch it and study it for a while and shed light on it through the mind map system and the psychoeducation of the system, then again, that truth light can be turned toward yourself, and then you can have not only insight into another person, but an insight into yourself. And this is what we're going to be doing during the webinar. We're going to be walking through the system, learning a lot, and then, of course, have a lot of time for questions and answers. And people, again, are welcome to also supplement the webinar with some private sessions with a therapist if they choose to do that. And then, of course, watch the Mind Map video series so that you can read the book, watch the video series, process it through the webinar, and if you wish, process it with an individual therapist. And that's what it takes to dig down in there, because you can't, as I said, just manage symptoms. You can't just medicate symptoms. It's not enough. Medication, a whole subject that I've spoken about. People ask me, what do you think of medication? Well, it depends on the circumstance. Certainly, if the mind and the body are interconnected, which they are, in such a way that just the therapy is not enough, the person really needs to dial down their emotions, then it's a plan. It could be part of the plan. It could be plan B. It could be something that is tapped into after therapy has been tried first, and maybe in conjunction with therapy. I'm not big on medication. With that said, if somebody is exhibiting bipolar symptoms, psychotic symptoms, if somebody is jumping out of their skin from anxiety, or clearly needs something to help with a deep depression. I'm not a psychiatrist. Remember, I'm a psychologist, so my tendency is to go toward the psychodynamics of it all. But just know that I'm not the only opinion here, and sometimes it is helpful to bring that into the therapeutic, I guess, extended support system. So, group therapy and panel number 2. So I'm hoping you're beginning to understand that when you see people literally cracking up because they're hurting, they're in pain, then it's easier to see how this amygdala, which is the emotional brain, the reactive brain, can cause a problem. If any one of you has ever been in couples therapy, you could see how couples trigger off each other's amygdala and have a hard time soothing each other, because they're not in a space of cognition. They're in a space of reaction. So when we react, we're going to say things and do things that are not exactly under cognitive control. And in a group setting, you can hear these reactions from people and watch them. And then we can together start to look behind these reactions and see where the causal injury lies so that we can connect the dots between the injury and the reaction. Um, think of it as more on autopilot. These reactions are more on autopilot than they are under the executive control of our cognitions. Now, all of this mess, so to speak, then gets encoded in panel number 3. So people now take the messages, these conscious and unconscious messages that are delivered by the parents, and they weave these messages into the fiber of their being. And then this enters belief systems, beliefs that they're not good enough, beliefs that they're stupid, beliefs that they're losers, beliefs that they're unlovable, beliefs that they're never gonna be loved by another, and it just, the list goes on. So we incorporate these messages into our psyche, and I have a term for it. It's called the psychovirus, and these psychoviruses then become our belief systems about ourselves and the world. And in a group setting, it's really interesting then to hear other people's belief systems, because it'll give you an objective bird's eye view of how distorted they are. So let's say that one person in the group thinks that they're ugly, and you're looking at the person thinking, that's a beautiful person. How can they think that? Well, newsflash, it has nothing to do with their looks. It has to do with core belief systems. So if the parents message them that they're ugly, if they were bullied to believe that they were ugly and the parents didn't intervene, then that's what they're going to encode into their psyche. And so you will be able to see these distortions very clearly from an outside perspective, and it's less clear, of course, from when you're looking into the mirror at yourself. So again, this is a call-in show. I hope to hear from everybody or somebody, and let's mind map this. And maybe somebody who's been through group therapy and recalls some of the experiences that were very eye-opening as a result of group therapy. I remember part of my education as a psychologist was to be in group therapy. And part of what we studied were triangulations and alignments and projections and so on, and an opportunity for a reality check. So one of the elements that's very crucial to having a good group setting is to have safety. Very, very important, because without safety, then you don't want to share. And it's impossible to have insight if you're closed down. And so the safety aspect is something that in the webinar, that's pretty easy, because you can turn on the camera if you want, you can turn off the camera if you want, you can say something, you can not say something, you can use a fake name if you want. And so it's a very nice way to stay safe and anonymous and still have that group experience. Now, the other thing about group is that people may triangulate with each other and actually replicate these systems gone wrong. So one person might transfer onto another their mommy issues, and then transfer onto yet another their sibling issues, and replicate the triangulation of the dynamics of the golden child, let's say, the good sister, and then they become the the lost child or the scapegoat. And so we see it again play out. And that's what makes it so interesting and revealing, therefore educational, is that we can go through these loops and go through all of these dynamics that we loop through in life, and then have a kind of like a little bit of a sampling of that. Um, do we have a call here?
We sure do.
Oh, I'm very happy to hear that. And hi, you are on the couch. And so, what is your name, or what would you like me to call you?
Oh, Dale from Washington.
Hey, how are you doing?
Hi. Dr. Judy, on that group, how would you set that up as far as asking individuals what would be the introduction to each individual?
I'm thinking that people can just either turn on or off the camera. It's at their discretion, and then they can use any name they really want to use. Obviously, I'd have everybody's email because they're signing up for the group. So, in that respect, I'd get to know people before they sign up. But then, in terms of, you've done a lot of Zoom calls, correct? Where there are a lot of people in the meeting room, correct? Correct?
Right. Is that what it is? A Zoom
Yeah, it would be
group?
like that. I just did a neighborhood watch Zoom meeting, and so it reminded me how it works, that some people just talk and they don't turn the camera on. They can stop the video, or mute, I guess, yeah, they can just right, they can blank out the video and just speak. So that way people can feel very comfortable about it, and anonymous about it if they like.
Okay, that makes some clarification.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I thought about that. I was trying to understand how that was going to work. The thing about how a person explains their situation, I think you have to look at what role you played in your family and what roles other siblings played and
Yes.
what your parents' roles were,
Yes.
and then even outside of that, to your grandparents and your cousins and aunts and uncles,
Yeah. Yep.
and once
Exactly.
you lay that map out, it sure makes it clear how
Yep.
things evolved. Because I think in my family, it came mainly from uh, from my father's side of the family. My mother's side of the family seemed to be pretty clear of all that, but
Mhm.
got sucked into it like a vortex.
Right. And
Um,
now I'm just imagine what it would be like for you to see this played out in somebody else's life, not you, and watch it in front of you. So then you can start to pull out of the system, because that's where we get clarity, is when we could, even for a minute, pull out of the system and observe it, even though it may be similar to your behavior and your pain and so on. But when you're observing it in another person, you're not in the absorb mode, which I know you and I have talked about a lot.
right. Yeah, I
Right?
didn't. Right, right. I understand what you're saying.
Right, like
Uh,
you're watching this movie, but it's not a movie because the person is there, and then you can then actually feel your own triggers starting to happen. And then when that happens, you can know that something's going on internally that needs to be processed, and then we can bring it up in the group, and we can start processing it. And as you're processing your feelings, then somebody else out there is processing similar feelings. So it's sort of like this injury starts lighting up, and then that injury starts lighting up. And pretty soon we're covering a lot of ground because of the group, and a lot of the patterns and systems, as I like to put it, start becoming clearer and clearer. And it becomes interesting, and I hope fun, to start identifying them, because the enemy is not us. The enemy, so to speak, is when we buy into this system gone wrong, when we're taken down this path of reactions and uh, negative core beliefs and lies and misperceptions and horrible defense mechanisms and so on. that's really the challenge. That's what we're all, it's kind of teamwork, if you will. We're all on the same team of busting the psychopathology. And, even as I say it, I'm getting really excited about doing the group, because it's not like we're there going, let's see what other people are up to or feeling. It's like, interesting. I have that going on too. And so now that I know about that and I can identify that piece within myself, now I can begin to bring it back to me and be a little bit more brave to confront it, because that person is confronting it, or the therapeutic process is confronting it. And that's another reason you don't have to say a word during the seminar if you don't want to. And you could just watch it and learn, and then let yourself be triggered, and then take notes, and then process it internally, or with a therapist if you want afterwards.
That's over 3 sessions.
That's over 3 sessions. That's over 3 sessions. We're compacting this thing. Remember, this is a psychoeducational plan. So we're going to do panel 1, 2, and 3 and mind map it. We're going to work together for 3.5-ish hours. So be prepared to do that. We'll take little breaks in between, and try to make it as fun as therapy could possibly be. And then what I would require from people, hopefully they will have read panels 1, 2, 3, and watched the video of panel 1, 2, 3, and have that mind map journal in front of them, so we can get down to business, the business of identifying these wounds, these reactions, and these encodings. And then we'll have a week's break to process all of it. And if people want to do their individual work on this, they can. And then we pick it up the next week, panels 4, 5, 6, tracking all the chaos, meaning everything that went awry as a result of 1, 2, and 3, and then break down our defenses and watch people actually get defensive, and then watch how we get defensive, and then watch how easy it is to identify other people's defenses, not as easy to identify our own defenses, and then start processing the psychological pain, which we will do together. Panel 6 is probably the heaviest session, because we're identifying the toxic pain of narcissistic abuse and childhood wounds. And this pain, as you can see metaphorically by the diagram of panel 6, this is where the pain either explodes and projects on other people, or implodes and people swallow it, and that usually turns to depression and self-harm. And so we're going to find pathways to express it. So not unload it on others, and not unload it by chastising ourselves, but actually processing the feelings, cleaning them out, if you will. And so that we don't have to carry these burdens. And that's where the group can get fun, because we can role play some of this out. And that'll be very interesting for people to participate in, being the mother figure, the father figure, the sister figure, the brother figure. And that's where therapy gets creative, because I can't think of a single session where it's been exactly the same session as another session, because therapy is an organic process, right, Dale? You know that. It depends on who's in the group.
Yeah. You could almost put this whole scenario into a theatrical play. You could go to a theater and watch the whole thing play out.
Yeah, you're
and
in.
I think it would be a phenomenal. I think it would be a phenomenal thing to see, because people would sit in the audience and identify without having to be, open about it. But you know what I'm saying?
And I think you're reminding me to make a rule about that people don't need to use their names. They just it's not necessary. If they want to use their first name, it's fine. Or if they want to use an alias name, that's fine. And just remember, you always own your own confidentiality. You get to keep that. And, I guess there are many ways of disguising yourself if you do want to be on the camera. I could wear sunglasses, a hat, whatever you want to do, as long as you feel comfortable. That's the key: safety and feeling comfortable. And then, of course, having enough perspective to just watch other people be activated by their situation enough so that emotional file comes up in you.
Well, I didn't really have anything else to add. I just wanted to get some clarification and find out more about it.
Yeah, and Dale, if you'd be so kind to leave your email or address, I did want to send you something. So I think I tried to call you, but I had the wrong number. So just, email me, Dr. Judy at psychologicalhealingcenter.com. And that way I'll have it. Okay.
Okay. All right. We'll do that. And then on the final third session, hopefully everybody comes home and the lights go on. Hopefully the light upstairs and the brain goes on.
Right. That's where the lights go on. The paradigm shift is where you begin to clear your psycho-perceptual lens. Your boundaries get more clear. There's a lot of growth that happens. I just had somebody finish their panel 6. I think it was about a couple of weeks ago, and they were commenting on how much lighter they felt. So, they didn't have a measuring stick. Like, how do I know I'm better? Well, do you feel lighter? Yeah, I feel lighter. Are your symptoms down? Yeah, they are. Are you projecting as much on other people? No, I'm not doing that. So that's where you get to see the results. Because, if you do a math test, right, you get the paper back. You got 95%. That's great. But when you do psychotherapy, what do we have to look for? Well, a feeling of lightness, a feeling of symptom relief, a sense of ability to have insight, a sense of ability to be the light to other people. So in panels number 7 and 8 and 9, we'll talk about the paradigm shift that happens as a result of the clear-sightedness, the insight, and then panel number 8, which represents the healing or recoding. And then panel number 9, where we could be the cause of not only better outcomes for our own lives, but we can become the light and leaders to others. And there's no other time than now that becomes so important, because there's so much darkness on the planet. And many of you know that I have another website called healingglobalDisconnect.com. It's not the most developed site in the world, but it's got my message there. And so it's impossible for us to heal globally until we heal individually. So we all have to take responsibility to do this healing so that we can, in essence, help others, pay it forward, make sure that we don't mess up our next generation. And they're just, there are too many reasons to list as to why to do this work, not to mention the fact that who wants to manage symptoms and anger, and who wants to take medication and be in therapy for forever. And people are just, we're busy people. We don't want to spend tons of funds on therapy for months and months and years. And so this is my Occam's razor way of breaking it all down. And Occam's razor means simply the shortest distance to get there. It's like the shortest distance between two points, and that would be from a psychological model perspective, the mind map.
Well, I think I sent you something on an article that said that people's mental health was supported by being able to feel like they've been seen and that they've been heard.
Yes.
And without those two qualities of not feeling like you're being seen or you're not being heard, you go into a state of depression and anxiety. But
Thank
once you feel like your voice has been heard and that you actually are being seen by others,
Yep.
that your spirits lift, and maybe
Yep.
this will be the opportunity for those who attend that conference with you to get that lift that they need. So anyway, with that last thought, I'll go ahead and sign off. But I just wanted to touch base on that.
Thank you so much. Your comments are always so valuable, and you've been a role model of transformation yourself. So nice to speak with you always, Dale.
All right. Well, have a good night, and I'll touch base with you on email.
Okay, awesome.
Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye. If there's anybody else that wants to call in, I'm happy to take another call. We still have a few minutes. And so, so that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. Of course, I do a lot of work individually. It's just that it to me, it's a great and fun and an interesting idea to do this on a webinar basis. Also, it saves you money because it's less expensive to do a webinar than see me for 10 sessions. And of course, you can see me or one of my team members. It's just that I always love to teach what I created and then see what happens. And there's nothing more satisfying for me than to make a difference in other people's lives. And so being a part of the group is also an opportunity. See, when you share, you make a difference in other people's lives. So Dale, when you call in and you share about your transformation, then it inspires others. And Robert, if you're listening, when you share, or whoever calls in and shares, people are listening to that and empathizing with it, or finding ways that they can add to it. And if you look at panel number 8, which is my recoding panel, panel number 8, you will see a DNA strand with a bunch of people holding hands and climbing up the ladder. And so on a group basis, we get to do teamwork, and we also get to synergize with each other, which is a metaphor for panel 7 is a metaphor for paradigm shift and synergy. So once we have that synergy, we can climb the ladder, and the more people that have insight and participation and hauling in the same direction of busting psychopathology, because that's what we're on the same team to do. We're here to checkmate your psychopathology so that we can demolish it, dismantle it, and not have it be the cause of the next chapter of your life. Because there's being the cause, which is where you're in the driver's seat, and then there's being at the effect of, where you're unconscious and you're just sort of letting it topple all over you. So it's proactive, reactive. So proactive being the cause, reactive being at the effect of. So I'm very much looking forward to this group and this group webinar, and it will begin in end of March. I guess it's coming up in about a week and some. And so please do sign up. I'd love to have you on board this journey. And you can always write me at Dr. Judy at Psychological Healing Center. The information is up there, and I will be sending out e-blasts, but you're free to write me about it if you're not on my email, Dr. Judy, DRJUDY, at psychologicalhealingcenter.com. And so with that said, if there are no more questions, are there any questions in the chat room?
There is. I saw one where it said, Dr. Judy, could you please address why after a breakup with a narcissist, your mind wants to call him back, like as sirens of a mythical times?
Okay, so that's the Freud, and we're going to cover it in this recovering from narcissistic abuse, because we are driven to repeat, and we're driven not because we're stupid. We're not because we're wanting to do it again. We're driven because actually we want the person who hurt us to heal us. We want to make it right with that person. And just particularly for that person, I want to recommend a video that I'm really glad that I did, called The Herder Cannot Be the Healer. I did two of those episodes, one called The Herder Can't Be the Healer, and then the other episode that I did relatively recently is The Herder Can't Be the Healer Unless dot dot dot. And listen to that video as I answer it. And in this webinar of healing from narcissistic abuse, I am going to go thoroughly through this phenomenon of trying to chase after the herder, get him back, get it together, and live happily ever after, and why we're driven to do that, what forces behind this dynamics exists. So that's a very, very heavy topic, and we will we'll definitely cover it in this upcoming webinar. Any other questions in the chat room that I can answer?
Let's see. Would identifying. It says, would identifying your individual family roles be a good starting point to understanding the narcissistic abuse within?
Yes, because there's another video I want to point to. I guess I'm glad that I've done a lot of videos called Sibling Rivalry, Parents are the Cause. So you're going to see how the pawns are set up by the narcissistic parents, because it's, again, about alignment with them. And if they're so interested in your aligning with them and filling out their agenda, they're, of course, less interested in creating peace and synergy between the siblings. And then they'll pit one against another, and you'll be able to watch it. And hopefully we'll have some fun with this webinar and reenact some stuff so that you can see it with your own psychological vision. And that's the part that I'm excited about, because we can get really creative about this. So any other questions in the chat room?
I think that's it for questions, mostly just people interacting.
Okay, well, thank you so much, everybody. And please, if you have any more questions about the webinar, call, we'll answer them. And we're starting March 30th. It's going to be intense, and it's going to be very psychoeducational. And again, we're going from the past, encodings, dismantling all that garbage, and then paradigm shifting you out of this mess so that you could be the cause of a better outcome for part 2 of your life. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining in. And I'm looking forward to meeting new people on March the 30th. And I'm always looking forward to talking to you on my YouTube episodes. So thank you for tuning in. See you next time. Good night.
And if you've enjoyed my show, please subscribe to my channel. If you need help, please call the number below.